What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Enjoying the Review. I'm your host, Incomparable Zach Jones, and I think we got a good one for you today, folks. Today, I'm going to be giving both a non-spoiler and very detailed spoiler review and recap of the latest MCU film, Thunderbolts asterisk. Now, what does that asterisk stand for? I'll never tell. Actually, I will. I will be telling, but I will be telling that in the spoiler section of the review. And fear not, if for some reason you haven't seen the film yet, I will give clear warning when I switch over from non-spoilers to spoilers. Really quick before I get into things, though, you guys know all this. Please, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Please leave thumbs up, comments, positive reviews, all that good stuff. You can also listen in audio form on your podcast catcher of choice. And you can follow me on social media, either on Twitter at ZachJonesLive, ZachJonesLive, or on Blue Sky at Enjoying the Review. All right, guys, let's get into it. So, Thunderbolts, what did I think? Guys, I'm happy to say I thought Thunderbolts was a pretty good time and a very solid entry into the MCU. And I think the MCU kind of needed this. There's been kind of a string of movies that I think people have been kind of hemming and hawing on. Now, I will say, I don't think this movie is like top tier Marvel. I would say it's like the next tier down, but it's still solid. My official score is going to be a 7.5 out of 10. I think this was very, very solid. And, the last movie was Captain America Brave New World, which I want to say I gave a 5.5 to. I thought it was just kind of very mid Marvel. This is definitely better than that. I'm happy to say. And so why is it better? Well, I think this movie, here's the thing. I think we all, to an extent, like bombastic action superhero movies and Marvel movies give us. But if they don't take the time to get us invested in the characters, the action then is just meaningless. It's just visual noise, right? And so I think what works here is they do get you invested in the characters. And specifically, I think Yelena, Florence Pugh's character, Yelena. I think she really is. This movie is her story for the most part. She's our central character. And I think this movie does a very good job of getting us very invested in her. In fact, there is a scene between her and her father, played by David Harbour, late in the movie, which I think is very affecting. And I think it's kind of the heart of the movie. It works really well. And this movie, more so than I would have guessed, is really kind of an exploration of depression. So, it's actually tackling, an issue that a lot of people deal with, which is not something you necessarily, I didn't know going into this movie that that would be central to the plot, but I think it was an interesting choice, and I think it really worked. I also want to mention David Harbour, who, for the most part, I would say is the comic relief of the movie, and he works well in that regard. But then when you're not expecting it, you do get that scene between him and Yelena that I was referencing. And it's like, oh, wow, he put, you get some emotion out of that scene, and it works, it shows he's multifaceted as an actor. I think, actually, let's talk about the John Walker character, U.S. agent. Him, I will say, for most of the movie, he's kind of an a-hole, but they do kind of give you a little bit enough. I feel like with him, they give you just enough depth to where you don't absolutely hate him. You know what I mean? He kind of rides that line, and I think works. Let's get into some things that stop me from putting this movie in top tier Marvel, because I do think there are some things that were kind of undercooked and maybe didn't work as well. So Bucky Barnes, Winter Soldier. My issue is they still haven't sold, Brave New World, they come out of nowhere, and we find out that he's like a congressman now, which I thought was a bizarre choice. And even in this movie, we get more of him as a congressman, and it's a bizarre choice. And they just haven't sold me on this move. I still think it's weird that, given his past and everything, this would be where he ends up. And, like, I don't know. It's just, I have a hard time buying that he would have been elected to this position and that he would have even wanted to go this route to try to change things. But I'll give him the chance. Maybe eventually they'll convince me that it was a good narrative choice. But right now, I just think it's kind of weird. The ghost character. Visually, I like the things she can do, but for me, this is a character that needs more depth. I don't want to spoil it here, but with some of the other characters in the group, you get these little kind of flashbacks that make us more invested in them, give them a little more depth. And for whatever reason, she doesn't get that. She gets one line of exposition that kind of sums up what we know about her from the Ant-Man 2 movie that she was in. But for whatever reason, everybody else gets one of these like little kind of flashback moments. And she doesn't. And I'm like, I think they should have given her one, like, get us more invested in her. So I think that was a missed opportunity. And then speaking of missed opportunity, I'm not going to spoil it. Once I get into spoilers, I'll talk about it more. But there's one character that's just completely wasted in more ways than one. I'll get to that in the spoilers, but a missed opportunity for sure. Let's talk about Julia Louis-Dreyfus as Valentina Allegra de Fontaine. Here's the thing. I like Julia Louis-Dreyfus, but I do think this character is kind of a mustache twirling villain. There's not much there. And they actually, oddly enough, she gets one of those flashback moments that I was referencing. And I still kind of don't think it adds much to her or informs where her character is. So it's just really weird. I feel like her character, on the DC side of things with Amanda Waller is a terrible human being. But in the comics, at least, they explain where she's coming from. And you kind of go, oh, okay, she's a horrible person, but I get where she's coming from. And I don't kind of get that with Valentina yet. I'm just kind of like on the she's a horrible person side. And I'm not exactly sure how she got from A to B, even given this flashback they have in this movie. So I think she's a little undercooked as well, in my opinion. And then Louis Pullman is introduced in this movie, his character Bob, which of course I'll get more into in spoilers. I liked him decently. I'll just say that he ends the movie, especially the end credit stinger, which I'll get to. He ends in a weird place where I'm like, how do they use this character in the future without doing something that feels redundant to what happens in this movie? I can't get into more of that now until I get into spoilers. But yeah, I think this movie. I think it kept things grounded and simple enough, and I mean that as a compliment, that it worked. And when it gets to the final kind of bombastic action scene, like you're invested enough in the characters that it works, and it doesn't just seem like mindless action for the sake of action. Um, so yeah, thumbs up to the Thunderbolts. Like I said, my final score a 7.5 out of 10. So, guys, I think that is going to be my non spoiler review. With that being said, clear warning, let's get into spoiler territory. So, what I did, I do this for all the movies I review, is from memory, I kind of I'm going to recap the film is in a as detailed a fashion as I can. There would definitely be some scenes I missed. There might be some scenes I put in slightly the wrong order, but I think I got pretty good notes here that will allow me to hit all the high points of the film. And I'll let you know kind of my thoughts, spoilery thoughts, as I go through kind of some of the stuff I was referencing. So, guys, let's go. So, right off the jump, I like it when Marvel does unique stuff with the just the intro. So it starts the Marvel logo, and it's doing the Marvel fanfare, the dun 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 stuff, but it slowly the logo starts to turn black. The bombastic Marvel fanfare kind of gets drowned out into darkness, as an allusion to the film and like the depression, the void, and all this. And so I thought, just right off the bat, that's a good touch. It's cool when they do things like that with the opening logo. I like that. So we open on Yelena. She's on top of a skyscraper. We of course seen this in the trailer, and she has some narration going on. And in this narration, she basically mentions that she's depressed in the wake of her sister dying, and she just kind of feels this emptiness. And she even mentions this void, which of course is going to be an allusion to the century / void going forward. And and like I said, her character really is the heart of the movie. Overall, it really is her story, and she does a great job here. So she, of course, base jumps off this tall building onto another building. She does her thing. She's taken out a bunch of guards. And so she eventually, she has one guard tied up, and she's taught, basically this narration is her, she's been telling this story, getting her feelings off her chest to this guard, right? And there's this face scanner, but there's nobody around who matches the face scanner to get her where she needs to go. I think somewhere in this, it's set up that she's working for Valentina, and she needs to destroy evidence in this laboratory. So she's like, well, I can't open the face scanner, so I'm just going to have to blow up the lab. And she also notices this guinea pig in there. All of a sudden, this scientist comes in with a gun, and they do this thing where it's like she's been doing this so long, like she knows like exactly what this guy's going to say before he says it, that type of thing. But she does notice, oh, hey, this guy has a face that I can use for the scanner. Anyway, they get in this big fight, and it ends. This guy ends up accidentally like shooting himself in the face, and so like she's like, well, that's not going to work for the scanner now, right? So she's walking away from the building with a guinea pig, and it blows up, right? She has to blow it up. So now we go over to Washington, D.C. And Valentina is in the middle of an impeachment trial. And I actually forget what her official position with the government is. But whatever it is, she's going through an impeachment trial. The head of this impeachment trial is played by Wendell Pierce. And I like Wendell Pierce. I've been watching that CBS show Elsbeth, which I don't know if anyone hasn't watched it. It's basically like a female Columbo type show. And he's like the chief of police, and I like him a lot. He's good, and he's good in this. Anyway, we find out that Valentina was the head of this company called like Ox. I don't know if it's Ox Technologies, Ox Industries, something like that. And there's been rumors that she has been illegally experimenting on human beings in an attempt to make basically a superhero serum, I guess comparable to, Captain America's serum or whatever. She's trying to make a superhero, right? And she declares her innocence in front of all these people, but then immediately they cut to her and her assistant in this warehouse getting rid of evidence. And the assistant basically tells her, okay, all the laboratories evidence has been gotten rid of, except one. But the other thing is you kind of got the loose ends. I think she says like the loose ends are tied up, but the rope is on fire, meaning that the operatives that work for her are kind of the loose ends that are left, right? So her assistant mentions that all the operatives except one have checked in, and Valentina's like, "Oh, let me guess which one hasn't." And so now we cut to Yelena, basically. Although we actually cut to Red Guardian, who, of course, is watching old footage of him when he was younger, working for the Russian government. So we have to assume he just watches this every day, right? While waiting at the door, Yelena notices that he's got this Red Guardian limousine service. Now he's a limo driver. But she visits him, and we find out that they have not been in contact for just over a year. Like he hasn't reached out to her, whatever. So Yelena mentions to him how she's been feeling, about how she kind of feels empty inside, and she is thinking about quitting working for Valentina, which Red Guardian thinks is a major mistake, and he personally says he would love to work for Valentina. He tells her that he was never happier than when he was like this Russian state-sponsored superhero, and he was working for his country, saving people. And he thinks that she, should maybe be doing the same, and be a more public-facing hero. So Yelena, decides that's sounds like a good idea. So she calls up Yelena and says she wants a position that would be more public facing. And Valentina is like, hey, yeah, I can make that happen. I just need you to do one more mission, the old one more mission type thing, right? So Yelena's mission is to stop a thief who is trying to rob this mountain laboratory owned by Valentina, or in Ox Industries or whatever. And that thief turns out to be Ghost, right? I will say, I am glad that they are using the Ghost character again, because to me, Ant-Man 2 is kind of like an unmemorable movie. Like, I'll be honest, I only watched it once. Maybe one day I'll revisit it, but it just didn't really do it for me. But I'm glad, like, some of these smaller characters, they're not just like thrown out the door and they're like, oh yeah, we could actually reuse her and get more juice out of her. That being said, like I referenced in my non-spoiler review, I really wish they would have given her a little more depth. That would have been nice, but it's cool seeing her. So Yelena follows Ghost into the laboratory, and she's looking around, and she finds these documents about something called the Sentry Program, as well as a lot of photographs of some dead bodies. So She can tell Valentina's been, up to no good, and some bad things are happening, right? All of a sudden, John Walker shows up, and he's a horrible shot. He's got stormtrooper type aim, and so he starts shooting at her, but she, blocks it with, I think, like a briefcase or something she's holding. And we find out that Yelena is his target. But as John Walker comes after her, he is suddenly attacked by Taskmaster, and we find out that he is her target. So we're seeing a pattern here. Finally, Ghost appears, and we find out that Taskmaster is indeed her target. So they all start fighting, and it's just chaos everywhere, And in the chaos, a container is opened up. Okay, so this is something I was referencing in my non-spoiler review. Eventually, Ghost kills Taskmaster, and boom, that's it. So Taskmaster is basically the guy from the first Suicide Squad movie that can, like, climb anything or whatever that guy was, which I think is a shame because, I mean, I guess they just wanted, like, us to know off the bat, like, oh, no one's safe or whatever, but I don't know. Like, it just seemed like a waste of a character. I think I would have rather they kept the Taskmaster character around, made her a part of the team. But no, just unceremoniously, boom, just done. And so, yeah, I thought that was a bit of a wasted opportunity. Again, if you kill somebody that we're not invested in, it doesn't really work. This is another problem I had with the last season of Daredevil, which maybe I shouldn't spoil, but for someone who hasn't watched it. But basically, in the very first episode, a character dies, and they didn't take the time to get us invested enough in that character, I don't think, before they killed the character. And so, similar thing. I will say, though, this leads to a line later on that I did like, where, like, Ghost asks Yelena who Taskmaster was, and she's like, she's someone that lived a hard life, did terrible things, and died, which will be all of our stories when we die. Which is dark, but I do like that line. So yeah, Taskmaster dies, and then the rest of the group decide to stop and talk things out. And so they put it together that they all work for Valentina, and Valentina considers them loose ends and sent them all to kill one another. So all of a sudden, this large, muscular man named Bob shows up, and it takes the group a minute to piece it together, but we find out he was in the container that got opened up. And Bob here seems like a very kind of innocent, aloof guy. The Bob character, I like him, but given that this is a film, like, his character, really goes up, does like a 180, over the course of this movie, which is fine. Actually, it kind of is a 360 because it eventually makes a full circle, kind of. But I like Louis Pullman here. He was a fun character. So back in Washington, Valentina is holding like an Avengers themed party for some reason. Well, I guess I probably know why in retrospect. There's a lot of Avengers stuff in this movie, turns out. And she is basically trying to schmooze some politicians so that they don't vote in favor of her being, of her impeachment, of her being removed from office or whatever. And the head of the impeachment inquiry, Wendell Pierce's character, shows up and basically tells her that, like, this isn't going to work. Bucky, like who I said is now a congressman, finds Valentina's assistant, and she's like, "I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to like, you know, get intel on me for Valentina." But he's like, "Well, you know what? Take my card anyway, and if you run into trouble or whatever, give me a call." So Valentina's assistant. By the way, this assistant character, like, I thought they were going to go a certain way with her, and then like later on in the film, they don't really. And I'm like, okay, I don't know exactly what they were trying to convey with her, but okay. Um, so Valentina's assistant lets her know that Yelena and the others are trapped together in the laboratory. Like while they're in there, these walls come down and they're trapped in there. And so she pushes a button that turns the laboratory into an incinerator. And of course, they can't just do it right away because where would the tension be in that? It gives the group like a 2-minute clock. So they're like, "Hey, Ghost, just walk out the wall and open the door for us." Well, apparently they set up these like sonic disruptors that prevent Ghost from walking through the wall. But they put it together that these things must have an independent power source somewhere in the room, which doesn't seem like it would have to be the case necessarily, but luckily for them, it works out to be true. And so they find that power source, they destroy it, and Ghost exits the room. But then, just as it looks like maybe Ghost left them for dead, she comes back, she opens the door, and they all barely escape with their lives. However, Yelena is blown into a wall, her head hits the wall, and she's knocked out. When she wakes up, Yelena wakes up in one of her memories as a child. And of course, we found out in the Black Widow movie, she was raised in this red room, like assassin training place. And in this memory, Yelena lures another child out into the forest. So this other guy comes up, shoots, and kills her. And that was like the first of her tests that she passed. And so this is like a horrific memory for her that she's reliving. When she comes out of the memory, Bob is holding her hand. And so we get this implication that Bob has powers and it was him that put her in this memory. So the group discusses what they should do next, and they're kind of bickering. And this leads to Bob calling John Walker, U.S. agent, an a-hole. And so John shoves him against the wall, and Yelena breaks it up, and she, takes Bob and is like, "Hey, are you okay?" And Bob mentions that he also feels this void inside himself, like Yelena does. And Yelena tells him the best thing to do is like her, is just to stuff it down deep and ignore it, right? So now we switch back over to Valentina. She's in the back of a limo with her assistant. And her assistant notifies her that the group made it out of the incinerator. And she shows the security footage of that room. And she sees Bob. And she's like, "Well, I want to know who that guy is because he shouldn't have been there." And she tells her assistant to call her men and have the men basically take out, Yelena and the others. So she gets out of the limo, and we find out, and I'll be honest, not that this is like, took a mental level IQ or anything, but I'm like, Red Guardian has to be driving this limo, right? And sure enough, he was. And so he got the lowdown. He mentions later that like he got it, so he was like picking her up because he kind of wanted to try to get it in with Valentina to be a hero again. But then he overhears this, and he knows Yelena's in trouble. So Valentina's assistant, she can kind of see that things are getting out of control. So she does call Bucky and lets him know what's happening. So the group are stuck in this mountain stronghold, and they find themselves at the bottom, like this very long shaft. And John Walker, he's got the super serum, so he tries to jump. He jumps really far, but the shaft is so tall, he just like ends up falling back down. So Bob's like, "Well, I got an idea," because none of them, well, as far as they know, can fly, right? I think Elaine even mentions we just all punch and shoot things, right? So they all like interlock their hands and go back to back, and they start slowly climbing up this long shaft. When they get to the top, like none of them want one of the other ones to make the move for the exit because they're like, well, you're just going to let us all fall, and that'll be that. But John Walker, he grabs Elena's baton and he makes that move, and they do almost all fall, but they hang on and he pulls them back up. But when he goes lastly to pull Bob up, now John Walker goes into one of his past memories, where basically we just see him being a negligent father, basically a bad husband and a bad father. He's not taking good care of his kid, and so this angers his wife. And that's what I was saying. Like the John Walker character is like kind of an a-hole, but here they do try to give him a little bit of depth right here. So just enough to make us not completely hate his guts, right? And we find out later on that indeed his wife left him. So they get out of that shaft, and then they see that Valentina's men are coming after them. So, well, they're trying to, again, kind of bickering with each other, trying to come up with a plan. And at some point, Yelena references that she used to play in this soccer team when she was a kid called the Thunderbolts, and they never won a game, right? So they put this plan together where, like, Yelena's gonna blow a hole in the wall. The men will come in. Yelena will turn on the power, which will blind all the men, allowing John Walker to defeat them. I don't know what the idea is. Maybe they're wearing like the what do you call them? The vision that lets people see in the dark, and if they actually see light, they'll be blinded, that sort of thing. And then Ghost, she is going to find a vehicle for them to escape in. So Valentina shows up, and again, like Valentina went from DC to wherever supposedly this like desert mountain stronghold is. So, I guess that walk up the shaft like must have took a long time, enough for her to like get on a jet and come over or whatever. But anyway, she shows up on the scene, and she tells the man in charge, "Hey, don't use lethal force, use non-lethal force," because she's like, she doesn't want Bob to be killed until she finds out who he is and what his deal is. Yelena ends up, she can't get the power back on because when the bomb went off, it messed up the wiring to the building. So John is forced to fight in darkness. Yelena tells Bob, "Stick behind me," and like he's wandering off and stuff. So she like ties him to her with like a fire hose or something. And they go back to back. Anyway, they fight, and she defeats all these men, and like Bob shoots a couple with a gun too. And then Walker shows up. She almost like shoots him, but he blocks it, So they dress up in the garb of the bad guys, full face masks and everything, and they pretend Bob is hurt and that they need to take him to like a medic. and Ghost procures like a medical van or whatever, right? So Bob goes in the back of that, and the other three in the front seat. The problem is they are stopped by guards, and John Walker isn't a smooth talker, so they get caught. And so the guards are going to stop them, but all of a sudden there's a gunshot, and what we find out is Bob ran out the back of the truck and started shooting a gun to distract everybody so that the other three could get away. So, against Valentina's orders, her like head of security has his men shoot Bob with live rounds. He falls down, and for a second, the other three, as they're escaping, kind of think, "Oh, Bob's dead," right? But no, turns out that Bob, not only is he bulletproof, he can fly. He's like floating off the ground, right? But they shoot him some more, and he like flies into the air. And the other group that they're driving away, but they're not so far away as they can still see him, and so they're like, "Oh, there was more to Bob than we thought," right? But then Bob, he goes up and he falls back down, and he hits with such a force that it makes this huge like crater and dust cloud, and it flips over the vehicle that the Thunderbolts are in. I'm just going to refer to them as the Thunderbolts. The next morning, Valentina has Bob's body flown to New York, and I think at that point tells her assistant to like alert the press that in a day or so there's going to be a press conference. So since her vehicle's turned over, the other three are walking through the desert, and they all get down because Yelena sees a vehicle coming. But that ends up being Red Guardian's big red limousine, right? Which I gotta say is pretty convenient, because even if he overheard Valentina say that we're at some sort of like, mountain stronghold or whatever, like what are the chances he would be able to find exactly where it is? And also, like, I don't know if they mentioned where this place is, but it would have to, like, they mentioned that he's been driving for like more than a day or whatever, but I don't know. Like, I think it's pretty convenient that he got there, right? It's just one of those things you just gotta kind of forgive, but pretty convenient. Anyway, he sees them, and they get in the limo. So Red Guardian is really happy that they're all together, and he thinks that they should be a superhero team. That's his character in most of this movie. Is just he's really pumped. He's like, wants them to be heroes and everything. John Walker mentions like they are not Thunderbolts or something like that, referencing the story Yelena told him about her soccer team. And this leads to Red Guardian, reminiscing about the soccer team. And like they have an argument over who sponsored the soccer team and all this, I don't remember all of Red Guardian's lines, but he has a lot of, like I said, he is the comic relief of the movie. So he has all the comedy lines here. He mentions that they should be on a Wheatie box, which will later be referenced in the mid-credit stinger. Anyway, eventually some military vehicles show up behind them. And this was a good action scene, although kind of spoiled if you saw the trailers for the movie. So yeah, the military vehicles show up, start shooting at them. At one point, Ghost is going to like jump on one of those vehicles, but they also have like a sonic cannon that disrupts her powers. And so Yelena gets out and she shoots her little pistol at one, and it explodes. And she's like, what's going on? And then sure enough, and this was also spoiled in the trailer, Bucky has caught up to him, and he's taking out these military vehicles. And so he finishes that. And then they're like, "Yay, we're saved!" And then, of course, and again, ruined by the trailer. In retrospect, this whole scene was ruined by the trailer. But Bucky also, it hits their limo with explosive, and it totally flips end over end, which kind of reminded me of the uh, semi truck flip they did in the Dark Knight. Which it's cool. It's cool. So back in New York City, Bob wakes up and Valentina is looking over him. Um, and he is somewhat freaked out by her, and same when he saw her back at the mountain site, because I think he kind of has maybe a memory of her, um, and sees her as kind of a possible threat, right? She informs us about some of his backstory. So, he grew up in a rough family situation, abusive household, and he eventually became a drug addict who went to, like, I think Malaysia. And he had this job as, like, where he had to dress in a chicken costume and spin signs. He was down on his luck. And he signed up for a medical trial um, because he thought it might, he was desperate and thought it might make him something. And she says that, despite his tough upbringing and everything, he was tough enough to survive the procedure. And, she's like, only I know your true potential. So she's really trying to talk him up and gain his loyalty. Okay, so this is something I referenced in my non-spoiler review. Bob goes into her mind, and we find out that as a child, she accidentally got her father killed. She ran into this guy that said he was a friend of her father's, and she believed him and told him where they lived, and that guy showed up and killed her father. And so this is kind of what I was talking about, where, like, if this was something that would give her, like, kind of an Amanda Waller backstory, where we would go, okay, yeah, she's a terrible person, but we can see why this is leading her to do what she does. And I gotta say, really doesn't do that for me. So it's like, is it just supposed to be like a hurt people type situation? You know what I mean? I don't know. I think her character is kind of mustache twirly and underdeveloped, and they tried something here, but I don't know if it quite made me invested in her like I would like to be. You know what I mean? So Valentina meets with her assistant once more, who is very worried that Bob could snap at any minute. She's like, this guy is, like, all powerful, but you see what his mental state is like, right? He's not all there. And so Valentina tells her to prepare, like, a kill switch. Or maybe the kill switch is already in Bob, or they're going to prepare one and put him in Bob. But she's like, get the kill switch ready for him. So now the Thunderbolts, the group, they wake up at, like, an old, like, almost seemed like an abandoned gas station or something. I'm not sure exactly. And they're all tied up by the Winter Soldier. And he tells them that he is going to take them to Washington so that they can testify against Valentina. They kind of try to tell him about Bob and how, he's this powerful guy that Valentina now has control of. And then he's, like, seems kind of skeptical of them, but then he gets a call from who I believe, again, is Valentina's assistant, who tells her, hey, there's this Bob guy, and he's really powerful, and he's unstable. And so then Bucky's like, okay, we do need to do more than just go to Washington and have you guys testify. Like this guy is a serious threat. So he unties them, and they are going to go to New York and confront Valentina and Bob. So Valentina tells her assistant to get, like, a press team ready for a press conference. Valentina's assistant is basically expresses that she's unsure of what Valentina is doing, and she's like, um, I always worked for you because I thought like down deep, like you're a good person and you're trying to do the right thing. And Valentina says that there are no good guys. There are bad guys and there are worst guys. And she has this line that I'm not quoting exactly correct. But she basically says something to the effect that righteousness without power is useless or is meaningless or something along those lines. Um, which I like that line, I will say. Um, and she tells her assistant that she's disappointed in her and basically insinuates that, hey, I know you called Bucky. I know you dropped a dime on me. And like, you need to decide right now if you're on my team or not. Like, this is a come to Jesus type meeting, right? So the group drive. Oh, I also forgot to mention that Valentina has taken over the old Avengers building. Um, and that's her like headquarters now. And so the van are driving towards the Avengers building, and Red Guardian and Bucky are in the front seat, and Red Guardian's like, "So what's the plan?" And Bucky doesn't really have a plan, So he basically just drives into the first floor of the Avengers building, and they all get out and take out a bunch of Valentina's men. And then Valentina gets on a loudspeaker and she's like, "Hey, guys, I left the door unlocked. Like, you can just come up to the penthouse or whatever." So they get in an elevator and they go to the top floor of the building. And I think this is like the same room, that we saw, like, Tony Stark and Loki in the first Avengers film. So they talk to Valentina, and of course, like they're like, I forget exactly the ins and outs of their total conversation, but eventually one of them goes to put their hands on Valentina, and they're stopped. There's like a force field there, which Bob is controlling. And they actually, I forgot to mention, they did foreshadow this a bit with him. He basically has kind of forced telekinesis powers, and he tried to move a glass of water, and he like exploded it. So they did set up he has like those powers as well. So Bob comes down the stairs, but now he is all decked out in the Sentry suit. And Valentina even had him dye his hair blonde because she thought it made him look more heroic. Bob tells the group that he doesn't really want to fight them and that they should just turn themselves in. But of course, they're not going to do that. And so eventually, Red Guardian attacks him and he takes him out. And then they all start attacking. And he just wrecks shop. He's like Superman on steroids. He can fly, he can punch hard, he can telekinesis. He even has like a laser type vision where like he heats up at one point Bucky's arm, and he rips Bucky's arm off, and yeah, he just trounces all of them really badly. So they all go back down to the street in the elevator, and Valentina allows this because her plan is to basically frame the Thunderbolts as terrorists and then have Bob go down to the street below and take them out publicly in front of everybody. But when she orders Bob to do that, he refuses. And he's like, you told me like I'm more powerful than all the Avengers put together. And one of them is a god. So, I'm basically a god. And why would a god take orders from you? So this is where we see his personality kind of shift drastically. And so Valentina is like, oh no, this isn't going my way. Right. And so she's about to hit the kill switch, but Bob's too fast for that. He pins her against the wall and starts choking her. But Valentina's assistant, she picks up the kill switch, hits it. Bob hits the floor, right? So the assistant, like, they set it up to where we thought maybe she was like kind of switching over, redeeming herself, but then she kind of, in the end, goes back with Valentina, and she even says here, like, I want more, I want to raise, you know. Um, she kind of reminds me, again, to go back to Daredevil, the female campaign manager that for a minute we're like thinking, oh, she might do the right thing, and then like she kind of takes the coward's way out and goes back and does the wrong thing. So it's a similar story here, actually. Um, as they leave the room, though, Bob's body turns black. So a little foreshadowing. We're not done with Bob quite yet. Um, back down on the street, Yelena lashes out at everybody. Um, I forget everything she said. She kind of calls out, you know, U.S. Agent Johnny for being a bad husband and father. Um, she also slams Red Guardian and Bucky and Ghost in certain ways. I forget all of her dialogue, but she lashes out on all of them, and they basically all go their separate ways. Yelena walks away. Um, so this leads to what I think is kind of the best scene of the movie. Red Guardian follows Yelena, and she yells at him to go away, and he's like, no, I'm going to follow you for as long as it takes. Basically, I'm not going to stop. And she yells at him for not being there when she needed him the most. She's like, why have you not contacted me in a year? And he's like, I thought you wanted your distance or whatever. And she says, no, I didn't. Like, my sister just died and I really needed you and you weren't there. And we kind of see this change come over him where he's like, oh, shoot. But he's like, you know what? I'm here now. And they have a really good scene where, she breaks into tears here, and you know, they kind of have this cathartic moment where they make up with one another. And I wish I remembered like more of the specific dialogue from this scene, but it was really well done. I thought both Florence Pugh and David Harbour here, for me, it was like kind of the scene of the movie, the heart of the movie. Really, I thought it was really, really well done. And just as they make up, they notice there's a commotion in the streets. The people are looking up at something, and so they look up and they see Bob now. It's this dark, shadowy figure in the sky. Um, so Valentina's men start shooting at Bob, and he now has this power that just boom turns him into a black shadow, and it looks like he's killing them. And we'll find out in a little bit that he's not, but um, for the moment, it's like, oh wow, they're going dark here, and he's just like leveling these people. At one point, he kills like Valentina's like head security guy in a helicopter, and he also kills the pilot of the helicopter. And this causes the helicopter to like slam into a crane that's connected to the Avengers building. It falls down, causes all this chaos, and so now a bunch of debris is just falling on the citizens below, right? So Red Guardian goes into action. He grabs his platform and shields a bunch of people from debris. And then kind of all the Thunderbolts have their moments. Like Ghost like saves a guy. Bucky saves a guy. And then finally Johnny Walker, he gets under this big piece of debris that's about to fall on this woman. She gets out, but then it's so heavy it's about to crush him. But then all the Thunderbolts show up and they help him, you know, tip this thing over on the ground. Which a part of me is like, hopefully there's not a person on the other side of the debris because they can't see on the other side of it. But apparently they didn't kill anybody. And after they do that, like the public kind of clap for them, and they're like, oh, maybe there is something to us being a group. Maybe we can be a superhero team. Um, Okay. So all of a sudden, Red Guardian sees a little girl about to be crushed to death by another piece of debris. So he saves her, but then immediately she is turned to shadow by Bob, which again, a dark scene. Um, and that's where actually once they did that, then I'm like, oh, these people can't really be dying because Marvel's dark, but I don't think they're dark enough to like permanently kill this little girl, you know. So Bob then creates this large menacing shadow that basically turns everything it touches into shadow. And so the heroes start guiding people away from it. I always kind of find this silly in hero movies though, where the hero like you know is like go this way, go this, like they're guiding people away from danger when it's like people would just naturally run away from the danger. You don't have to be like this way folks, but this is something they do in so many like not even superhero movies but other movies with just heroes where they're like this way, this way. It's like yeah, no kidding. Away from the danger, you don't say. Um, but Yelena, she doesn't run from it. She decides to walk straight into the void because, I mean, number one, I think she's still kind of in a place where she doesn't really care whether she lives or dies. But I think she also suspects that going into the void doesn't kill you, and she can talk to Bob and get through to him and end what's going on. So inside the void, Yelena is forced yet again to relive the memory of the girl that she got killed. Um, and she eventually runs out of that memory into another one where, like, her and her other kids in this assassin training have to put a gun to parts together and assemble a gun. She's the first to do it, but all of her other classmates have to get like whipped across the hand as punishment. And then finally, she has to see her present day self who drank herself into a blackout. And they did set this up a little bit where she mentioned some time earlier where like she's been drinking heavily, you know, because of her depression. And one thing that was especially dark about this is she wakes up like herself that's drunk. And instead of like herself like attacking her, she like pours booze down her throat, which I'm like, oh wow, that's kind of dark, right? And then it resets in that room. And while she's in that room, she looks in a mirror, and in the reflection, she can see Bob. Um, and so she looks in that reflection. She tells Bob she wants to talk to him, and so he agrees to that. And so she's like, kind of, she turns around, and now she's magically in that room with Bob. Um, and he's almost kind of like in a childlike state in this room. He mentions that like this was the most peaceful room he can find, and all the other ones were worse. And we get a glimpse of one of those rooms where, like, as a child, like he was trying to protect his mom, so his father got abusive with him, and then his mom even yelled at him, saying like he always makes it worse, you know. So he came from a very abusive childhood. So on the outside, Ghost convinces the others that Yelena must have walked into the void for a reason, and that maybe it's not certain death. And she wants to go to rescue Yelena, and she finally gets the others to agree with her. So Yelena tells Bob, basically, that the advice she gave him earlier about stuffing the void down was wrong, and what they really need to do is confront it together. And she's there for him, and you can't just stuff things like that down, right? You got to confront it. Which again is kind of the message of the movie, of you got to deal with depression. You can't just let it fester, right? So Bob finally agrees with her, and then the room starts throwing things at them, which is kind of like void or it's Bob's subconscious, right? The void is part of him, and it's fighting back, you know. And that's when the others show up. And I get that they probably did this to save time, but the others are just like, oh yeah, I fought through all my bad memories. Like Bucky mentions, you know what my past was like. So you know it was like a bunch of roses for me. But a part of me is like, I kind of wish they would, even though it would have made the movie a little longer. I kind of wish we would have saw the other rooms that the others went into, especially Ghost. Like I said, I think she needed a room like that to get us more invested in her. So I wish they kind of would have done that with the others and actually um, showed instead of told. Um, but anyway, they start fighting back, and so Bob had told Yelena that that room they were in was the best of his memories. She's like, "Show me the worst," because her plan is basically is like, in order to solve this, we need Bob to deal with his past, to face the things that are causing his depression, right? So they go into the room with his abusive parents, and Johnny Walker punches out his dad. Um, so that kind of helps him confront that part of his past. So then from there they go into this street where we see, this is where he was a drug addicted guy in a chicken costume with a spinning sign, and Bucky ends up punching him out. So they deal with that part of his past. And then they end up going into the laboratory that Yelena was in the very beginning of the movie. She's like, I recognize this place. And we see Bob on a gurney. This is where he was experimented on with the super serum, right? But on this gurney is the shadowy Bob, the void, right? The other half of the equation, right? So the void uses his powers to basically hold all the other Thunderbolts against the wall. Like he wraps metal and other things around them. So he has Bob all to himself. And I forget the exact dialogue here, but the Void tries to tell Bob, kind of like what that depression voice in people would tell them, that basically that he's nothing and that he's nobody, that sort of thing. Yelena tries to yell at Bob that is not true, and so the Void wraps a thing around her neck, kind of restricting her ability to talk. And to ramp up the stakes outside, we see that the Void's shadow is now casting almost entirely over New York City, putting everybody into this shadow world. The Void angers Bob and kind of dupes him into punching him over and over. And as he's punching him, we see that Bob starts getting covered in darkness. And so Yelena notices that and puts it together that, that's what the Void wants, is Bob giving into his depression. And, this will consume Bob and just turn him into the Void completely. So Yelena, since the Void is being weakened here, Yelena breaks free of her restraints and she crosses the room, and all this debris is being flung at her. So she's jumping over desks and under beams and all this sort of thing. And, but eventually she gets to Bob. She holds Bob, tells him, hey, this is what it wants. But she's whispers to him, I'm here, I'm with you. And so then the other Thunderbolts follow suit. They break loose. They put their arms around Bob. They let him know that he's not alone, that they're with him. And so this breaks the Void's hold over him. And the shadow goes away. The shadow over New York goes away. The sun comes out. The heroes win the day, right? So they're all back on the street under sunlight. And Bob's back to normal, but he has no memory of what just occurred. Yelena tells Bob that he better stick with them, from now on. Um, so Bucky and Red Guardian notice Valentina. And of course, Red Guardian wants to kill her, but Bucky's like, no, we are going to take her in and she is going to get arrested. As they go to get her, though, she slips away past this barrier. And when they follow her on to the other side, and again, this is kind of convenient, but there's a press conference there waiting for her. And she announces that this group was basically her idea. And she tells the public, let me introduce you to the new Avengers. And so, of course, this is what the asterisk was all along. They're not the Thunderbolts. They're the new Avengers. And this is, of course, one of the likely things I think most comic book fans thought about. I thought they might call them the Secret Avengers or, something else along, or the Dark Avengers maybe. But in retrospect, it doesn't surprise me they went with New Avengers since, the Century was a big part of Brian Michael Bendis' run on New Avengers in the comic books. Makes sense. And then the movie ends with Yelena whispering to Valentina that now we own you. So, it's an interesting thing because it's a way of not sending Valentina to rot in prison and not just totally getting rid of her character, but making it so, they got something on her, right? And they can use her to their benefit. So I thought that was kind of a clever, development. Okay, so now we get the credits, and we get the mid-credit stinger, which isn't very substantive. It's just kind of a fun little thing where the group does end up on the Wheaties box, like Red Guardian referenced earlier on in the movie, and he's trying to impress this woman in the grocery store because he's on the Wheaties box, right? And it doesn't work. And then it cuts back to the credits. And they play that Starship song, Nothing's Gonna Stop Us Now, which I appreciate, which they also used in the Daredevil show. And then we get a pretty substantial end credit stinger. Sometimes I will say, if I had my druthers, there would only be mid-credit stingers and never end-credit stingers. Because as much as I appreciate the people that make these movies, I do not like waiting to the end. But I always do it for these movies. So I do appreciate it when it's actually something substantial, not just like a throwaway little joke or whatever. So the end-credit stinger, we go, for some reason, 14 months later, which... I don't know, Marvel in these timelines, because I remember Spider-Man Homecoming, it has that scene where it's like 5 years later, and eventually, is it 5 years or 8 years later? I remember there's some sort of thing like that, and eventually Marvel was like, oh yeah, we got that wrong, it shouldn't have been that many years or whatever. But anyway, 14 months later, for some reason, we find out that Sam Wilson is trying to sue the team for the use of the name Avengers, and that he is also putting together a group of Avengers. At least that's what it sounded like to me, and that's kind of what they set up in Brave New World as well. Okay, we find out that Bob is not using his powers at all, because if he does, it will bring out the Void. I find this weird because it means either Bob is not going to be using his powers in the future, which makes him an uninteresting character, or he's going to use his powers but always be on the verge of turning into the Void again, which would just kind of be a repeat of what we saw in this movie rather than giving him character growth. And so, I don't know, it leaves that character kind of in a weird place in my mind. So they're definitely going to use him again. I think they've already confirmed that he's going to be in the upcoming Avengers movie. So we'll see what they do with him. And then finally, Yelena says there's something weird going on in outer space, and they pull out some satellite imagery, and we see the Fantastic Four's space shuttle entering, orbit or whatever. So, I mean, they're giving us a little lead in to the Fantastic Four. Again, the 14-month time gap throws me a little bit. Like, I'm not sure why that's in there exactly, but because it's like, if there's a 14-month gap, like, wouldn't the Sam Wilson already have, you would think, put together a team of Avengers if he was working on that since Brave New World? The timeline here just is a little bit weird for me. Like, I don't know why there was that much of a gap of time. Maybe somebody in the can reach out in the comments and let me know what they think that is all about. But guys, that's the movie. That's not the Thunderbolts, but the New Avengers. What did you guys think of it? Like I said, I wouldn't put this in the top echelon of Marvel, but boy, oh boy, I thought it was solid. And it was refreshing after Brave New World, which I thought was pretty mediocre. But I'm curious, guys, what did you think of the movie? Please comment down below and let me know. But I think that will do it for today's show. So, guys, if you will, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Please leave comments. Please leave thumbs up. Please review the podcast. And you can follow me on social media, either on Twitter at Zach Jones Live, ZachJonesLive, or on Blue Sky at Enjoying the Review. But guys, until next time, I hope you're enjoying the review. Bye, guys.